Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include Heroes of the Storm officially going into maintenance mode, signs of potential loot boxes in Fallout 76, a roundup of some action RPG news, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the video description. And right before we dive in, I encourage you to ring the sub notification bell to be alerted of new Saturday episodes. Now launching into our first story about the Outer Worlds. This is a new game revealed by Obsidian, some of the original makers of Fallout and Fallout New Vegas. And in case you missed the reveal, we discussed it in last week's video, but a new story is now coming out about this game, basically stating that it will not be as big of a game as Fallout New Vegas. As reported by Kotaku, quote, "There are 2 planets in the game," Obsidian says, "although they're not open worlds. They're compartmentalized. Each of them contains several areas to explore, and Obsidian says there will be plenty to do, but the scale will be very different than New Vegas." Quote, within quote, "While we aren't discussing the exact amount of areas, a good bit of context for the approach is to think of what we did in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, with potentially more ground to cover and explore in each area," Dowling said in an email. So this shouldn't exactly come as a surprise. This isn't a full-blown AAA budget game. We can consider it something of a AA game. And I think for the most part, as long as the focus is on quality over quantity, I'm not very concerned. In other promising news about this game, as reported by Tech Power Up, Obsidian has said that the Outer Worlds will be free of microtransactions. And it's a sad state of affairs in the video game industry when we have to celebrate the fact that a single-player game will not have microtransactions. And in case you want to check out more about this game, Game Informer here has 14 minutes of gameplay footage, and I encourage you to check that out. Now onto some Fallout 76, not quite news, but speculation. Last week we said we'd hope that we wouldn't have to keep talking about this game, that there would be no further negative stories emerging. Well, another negative story has emerged. That said, we need to stress that the truth behind this story, or the truth behind the conclusions drawn by this story, are up for debate. This is not fact. But let's start by laying out what the facts are. Reddit user Despotak data mined some recent Fallout 76 patch files. After his full report, he stated, quote, "I hate to be the herald of controversial news, but there is a lot of work done on items that are collectively called lunchboxes. They are consumables that offer effects similar to serums, but with duration. For now, they look like part of the holidays event Bethesda is planning. They are not part of the Atoms shop yet, but there are some edits that strongly suggest they may be coming to the shop. Take all this with a pinch of salt and investigate further." Well, user Jess Main did investigate further and tried to interpret the findings. And what this user found is that these lunchboxes often have the ATX tag in the files, which is a tag used for items associated with the Atom shop. And for all intents and purposes, it seems that lunchboxes behave very much like loot boxes. You open them up, and it's festive and celebratory, and in fact, these even open up in-game for all players around to see, thus evoking this sense of benign envy and making other players feel like, oh, now I really want one of these, or oh, now I really want to spend money on one of these. And it seems, among other benefits, XP boosts are a thing that you can get from these lunchboxes. The user also seemed to indicate that there were signs of perk card packs being removed from the shop. And the implication here is that at some point in time, these perk card packs were designed to be sold, but at some point that decision was reversed. Now, for anyone who's not aware, in Fallout 76, there are things called perk packs, which are packs of 4 randomized perk cards. As you level up, there are certain benchmarks at which you earn a perk pack. And we really have to wonder, why have this system in the game at all? Traditionally, when you are leveling up in a Fallout game or any form of RPG, you can just pick straight out what perk you want. But to put it in this sort of randomized, literal card pack, very reminiscent of a booster pack in any number of collectible card games that are focused around purchasing these randomized card packs, one can't help but wonder, was the design intent at some point to sell these? were they initially conceived to sell them, but then the decision was made to just give them for free and not have a way for players to purchase them. But at that point, it was too late in development to rework the system, so they just kept in the card packs, but removed the real money element. And one can't help but wonder if this all began a year ago with the Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot box debacle, which gradually sparked a conversation that resulted in governments investigating loot boxes, and maybe developers and publishers growing scared about implementing loot boxes into games that they have not yet released. Maybe it was due to the controversy that the plug was pulled on selling loot packs. Sorry, perk packs. Now, ultimately, I can't imagine that Bethesda would, at this point, release paid loot boxes into Fallout 76. Be it the perk packs, be it even the lunch boxes. Are there signs to indicate that maybe at some point in development they had planned to? Maybe, I won't argue that, but I doubt players have anything to worry about with regards to Bethesda doing anything else to upset them on what would be a monumental level. But who knows, this has been one hell of a game release, and I think Fallout 76 has had perhaps the most entertaining launch of any game in history, as far as I can remember. Alright, on to some Heroes of the Storm news. We got official word from Blizzard that they are canceling all official Blizzard Heroes of the Storm eSports going forward, and they're effectively putting the game in maintenance mode. We'll still get new heroes, but they're moving a lot of developers off the project, and so development will likely continue at a very slow pace. Blizzard broke the news to the community via blog post signed by J. Allen Brack and Ray Gresko, and to selectively quote around the damage control PR fluff, quote, "We've made the difficult decision to shift some developers from Heroes of the Storm to other teams. We'll continue actively supporting the game with new heroes, themed events, and other content that our community loves, though the cadence will change. Ultimately, we're setting up the game for long-term sustainability, aka maintenance mode. We've also evaluated our plans around Heroes eSports. After looking at all of our priorities and options in light of the change with the game, the Heroes Global Championship and Heroes of the Dorm will not return in 2019. This is sad news for Heroes of the Storm players, and even sadder news for Heroes of the Storm casters and professional players. They've all just had their dreams of 2019 shattered. And while I sympathize with everyone affected, I can't say this comes as a major shock. First off, esports in general has been a pit that Blizzard's been chucking money into for the past decade. Esports started off being something big in South Korea, and over the past decade there's been an effort to grow the esports scene in the Western world, particularly in North America, and for a long time it was not a profitable venture. And Blizzard is one of the major entities that was really investing a lot of money into growing the scene. Prize pools, venues, salaries, marketing and advertising. And what I've heard from an insider is that often companies like these justify these expenses by grouping it into their advertising budget of the year. That's why for some of these games that are big in esports, you've seen as the esport has risen, ads for the esports have effectively replaced ads for the game itself. Now, I don't know if that's exactly the case for Blizzard, but what's without question is that Blizzard has sunk an enormous amount of money into esports. They seemed to me to be all in on growing the esports scene, working at a loss for a long time in the hopes of becoming perhaps the single greatest source of esports in North America and even the Western world. And I believe it's only really with selling Overwatch teams now at $40 million a pop that they're starting to make some money, and I'm not even sure if they're in the black after being in the red for so many years. Now, I have to admit that I could be wrong. I don't know the real numbers, but it just seems logical, and my inside sources in the esports scene seem to corroborate that esports is not a money-making business. And then we have to compound that with the fact that Heroes of the Storm is not one of Blizzard's more successful games. And it's almost entirely Blizzard's fault. Blizzard had the MOBA genre scooped out from under them. The MOBA genre started from a Warcraft 3 mod called Defense of the Ancients, Dota, and then given time, League of Legends emerged as the dominant name in the MOBA genre, and then even Dota 2 released, and Blizzard was simply too late in releasing its entry into the genre. The game's official release date was 2015, and by that time, even League of Legends had already seen its heyday, peaking in about 2013-2014. And since then, over the past couple years, the genre has been in a gradual state of decline because the Battle Royale genre has been replacing it in popularity. And now this announcement effectively corroborates the leaks from Jason Schreier that we discussed in this video here, talking about effectively the leaks were also about Diablo 4, confirming Diablo 4 and talking about how Activision implemented a new CFO that basically came in to tighten the belt. She said that this year was all about saving money for Activision Blizzard. To quote from the article, "This is the first year we've heard a priority being cutting costs and trying not to spend as much," said one person who was in the meeting with the CFO. It was presented as, "Don't spend money where it isn't necessary." To later quote in the article, "You would have thought Blizzard was going under and we had no money," said a former Blizzard staffer, who told me they left the company this year in part because of Activision's influence. Quote within quote, "The way every little thing was being scrutinized from a spend perspective." That's obviously not the case, that Blizzard is going under, but this was the first time I have ever heard we need to show growth. That was just so incredibly disheartening for me. If you haven't seen the full video about that, I encourage you to check that out. But one thing I do find interesting in all of this is that Blizzard made the statement official. With Diablo 3, for instance, they just slowly moved talent off Diablo 3 and onto other projects, whereas now they're effectively stating it. They're making it public, they're saying it in advance, and at least that's a bit reassuring for the degree of transparency and communication we can maybe see from Blizzard. Obviously this is bad news, but they could have easily just hidden the news. And with them saying in the blog post that they're moving the talent onto other projects, of course, the first thing we think is, well, they're moving them onto the mobile projects, and that very well may be the case. My concern is that this will be indicative of things to come, that this is just going to be the first of perhaps multiple casualties to this tightening of the belt, to this focus on showing growth, earning more revenue, cutting costs. Because if you look at all of Blizzard's properties, you'll see that they're all facing some degree of decline, some more gradual than others, but none are really showing any growth. All those trends are going down. And I believe if you look across all of Blizzard's currently supported games, the only one that really ever showed any substantial growth year over year was World of Warcraft. Growth that reached its peak nearly a decade ago at this point. But in more festive news, the Overwatch Winter Wonderland event began this week, and with it released a patch that saw buffs to Bastion, McCree, and Torbjorn, as well as nerfs to Brigitte and Doomfist, and reworks to Soldier 76. I'll drop in the video description a link to the full patch notes. In addition to the Christmas skins that we showed last week, we've also now seen Krampus, Junkrat, Sugarplum Fairy Mercy, Figure Skater Symmetra, Gift Wrap Bastion, and Biathlon Widowmaker, but you can hop in game to check out all the various Winter Wonderland rewards for 2018. Alright, on to action RPG news. This week we saw a massive update come to Grim Dawn, and it's being very well received by the community. So if you have Grim Dawn but haven't played in a little while, then I encourage you to check that out. I'll put a link to the patch notes in the video description. On to Path of Exile news. We're now a little bit over a week after the launch of the new league, Betrayal. And it was their biggest launch yet. The number of players logged in at the same time was 28% higher than their previous record. And in fact, for the first few days at least, after the launch of the league, they continued to see record-breaking player counts. If you're a new player diving into Path of Exile or thinking about it, I encourage you to check out my video that is a beginner's guide to Path of Exile. Now, while this league is being very well received, and on a personal note, this is the most fun I've ever had in Path of Exile, I think the league mechanic is really great. I've not played many leagues, but the league that I played the most was Bestiary, and I wasn't very fond of the league mechanic, but I'm really liking this mechanic for a couple of reasons. The first being that it is applicable to you and useful to you and fun as of level 1. It's always there. You go in, it's rewarding, it's not too challenging, and it scales up well. And again, while the league is overall being received very well, the only real complaints, or the biggest complaints that I'm seeing, are surrounding the delve mechanics that are being brought in from the previous league, and more specifically, the balancing around the mechanics. But lead developer Chris Wilson stepped in to say, quote, "We are doing a Passover delve balance to fix problems. I don't know what the changes are yet, but we'll try to get it done as soon as possible." And time again, GGG has delivered on such promises, so I'm sure they're going to work things out soon enough. In fact, it may even be done by the time this video goes live. And lastly, we don't have any Diablo news this week, but I will mention that I just released this week a video about if Diablo 4 were to be an MMO, as some rumors suggest, how best can we implement MMO elements into a Diablo game that will enhance the experience rather than detract the experience. And I encourage you to check out that video right there. And that's going to wrap up this video. But if you haven't, I encourage you to check out last week's video in which we discuss how Fallout 76 dev Bethesda effectively doxed its clients. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can become a Royal Raider on Patreon, where your support is immensely appreciated. We've got a variety of backer rewards, including behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more gaming content.